Good afternoon and welcome to a Celtic State of Mind. We're looking a wee bit different on a Friday afternoon. I've been drafted in place of your resident hostess, Laura Bradburn. I'm Paul John Dykes, as you know, and I'm joined today by the dream team of Tony Haggerty, Jim Orr and Alan Morrison. Welcome all to the Friday Bulletin. It's been very positive this week. I don't know if you're getting that vibe, Tony, when you're listening to the Acsom bulletins. Everybody seems to be, up in terms of their mood, and a lot of that is down to the bold Ange Postecoglou, isn't it?
It's good news week. Jim and Alan will remember that song. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's just been good news week at Celtic this week in particular. So, and a lot to be positive about. Debuts of the Japanese players, Matt O'Reilly, Baba O'Reilly coming in. It has to be Baba O'Reilly. That has to be his nickname.
Are we going to get another song? Are we getting another song here, Tony?
They have to play the Who song whenever he scores. It has to. Just because the Who played at Celtic Park and all that kind of stuff. So
yes,
and they played my hand early doors on that. So yeah, but it is all positive, isn't it? And it's you just saw a wee momentum shift, didn't you? Mm-hmm. The midweek results and stuff like that, and and the Japanese boys were impressive. It's one game, we accept that, but lots to smile about.
There is. You've already brought up music. JP and I get a hard time on a Thursday for talking about music too much, Tony. But you know what? You brought it up. The Who did play at Celtic Park. Who were supporting the Who at Celtic Park? Yes. Yeah. Were you there, Jim?
No. I'm not a big Who fan. I mean, the Who are good. I'm not a big fan. But
I think that, as I've mentioned so many times on Acsom, the first gig I ever went to was at Celtic Park. It was U2. And I think it would be good for Celtic Park to be a venue again. I think that's another good way of generating further revenue streams for the club. Mm-hmm. It would be great to see some of the great Celtic-minded bands and others playing at the famous stadium. We are on a high, and it's great to have Alan Morrison in because you can chip in with some comment in relation to new players coming in, what they're going to bring to the team. How do they link in? How do they match what Ange is trying to, what he's trying to build here at Celtic? But overall, I want to look at how far we've come under Ange because, there were some disappointed Celtic fans when the Eddie Howe deal broke down. How long ago does that seem at this moment in time, Alan Morrison, where Celtic fans expected the announcement, it didn't happen, and then very quickly we brought in Ange Postecoglou, and you look at the progress over the last 6 months. Do you think he's ahead of schedule? I'm going to ask you first, Alan.
Yeah, I mean, undoubtedly. I actually did a wee piece on, I'll just plug it, on my own sort of Celtic by Numbers site today, which is a very short piece, but it just shows, actually quite interestingly, the sort of narrative arc as told through the prism of expected goals. So don't come back, don't all switch off. It's not that bad, honestly. but it's fascinating. I mean, we all, a lot of us read up about him, and these days there's so many journalists now willing to engage from Japan and who know the Asian football scene that we're willing to engage. And we very quickly built up a profile. This is potentially a very special individual in terms of his personality, his philosophy, his own ethos and way, and just the way he conducts himself, and also the fact that he'd had some success wherever really he'd been, and that there was almost a template that he followed to get there. And actually, if you look at it, we went through this initial splurge of optimism because the early parts of August, the team were producing some incredible attacking displays. The hammerings of Dundee, St Mirren, the cup game against Hearts, although it was 3-2, was like almost like a 10-0 kind of game. And we just thought, wow, this is absolutely amazing. And then it kind of all went back down to earth again in September when it looked like doubts were creeping in. Did he have a plan B? Was he hell bent on only playing one way? Had we got the right players in? The Derby defeat was a bit painful. The hammering to Leverkusen was a bit of a sobering moment. And but then and Kyogo missed that whole month of September, and that coincided with a very sort of dodgy period. We lost at Livingston, and all those things were like, oh really, can he adapt? Can he solve the problems? But actually, ever since then, it's been steady improvement, which is what I love. I was looking for improvement in the data, and the underlying performance data is really promising. And what I tried to do at least is, it's easy enough to quote the data, but what's the context for that, right? So the context is an absolutely unbelievable profile of injuries across the squad. I mean, on average we're missing 6 players every game. Every game
incredible.
this season.
Yeah.
And also we've had a lot of young guys come in who are new to Scotland, new to the city, new to the culture, climate, the football, etc. And that's that you can't underestimate. And all of them are individuals. All of them will take different amounts of time. All will have their own personal circumstances and so forth. So if you think about that context, and you think about also then the amount of change, and change management is a hard thing to do. The amount of change that Ange is having to to manage, both in terms of playing style, new people, new environment. You add all that together, that's a very volatile and tricky environment to operate in. So all that being said, that's the context. The actual performance data shows that the article today I named it, "Are you ready for takeoff?" Because I think we're just about to ascend, and I think the second half of the season could be exciting.
Well, we're excited enough, so thanks for that, because you're going to push us even into a field of more excitement. But you mentioned there about XG. What do you make of Ange's comment, even when he's talking about I'm more of an XL man than XG, Alan? Tongue in cheek, but he knows how to play the media, he knows how to play the fans. He's a great communicator, isn't he?
Yeah, I think that's it. And I think, again, the stories this week about his conversations with Matt O'Reilly before he joined, that ability to communicate. I think what you see is what you get. He is tongue-in-cheek. He doesn't know how to play the game, but you always get an honesty. I don't think he's got any other setting but honest. And I think if you live your life that way, you'll generally get good results, I've found.
Yeah, definitely. When you're looking at Ange Postecoglou and that period that Alan mentioned, Jim, period of doubt, people starting to doubt whether or not he was the right man. Did he have a second kind of like game plan, a plan B? One thing about Ange, though, Jim, is every time he was speaking to the media or to the club and the club's media channels, he just stuck to his guns. How impressed have you been with that? Kind of like, he is set in his ways, but he's got this vision and he is determined that he's going to see it through his way, isn't he?
I think if you're a manager, you have to keep level-headed. You don't get too up, you don't get too down. That's why I tend to try and look at games. With Hibs game the other night, people were going off the scale about it. I thought it wasn't off the scale, anyway, we'll come back to that one. But in terms of the manager, we've won a watch. Just to echo what Alan said without saying XG, so many things he's done really, really well. And if you look at this time last year, not maybe back March, April, May, we were talking about trying to get Rafa Benitez, and we're talking about Jesse Marsh, and we're talking about Maresca, and they've all had their books in the last couple of months or so. So
yeah.
On paper, they were better managers. Whether they were elite managers, that's a discussion for another day. And we end up with this unknown guy. And I think, understandably so, at the start of the season, when the guy came in, people were thinking, who is he? And you get, people were a bit disparaging to him in the media, understandably so, because that's what they do. But I certainly want to watch. And all the stuff Alan said about the change management thing I think we brought in about 20 players and we've spent over £20 million, and that's incredibly difficult to manage. So I think he's done a marvellous job, but fans are very fickle. If we were to lose the next couple of games, all of a sudden he's a dud. So you have to keep level-headed, and I think whenever you win games, you have to look for things you could do better, and if you lose games, you have to look at things that that were quite good, and I think that's what he does. And there's been comments he's made to the media about the league being finished in October and stuff like that, and he must be totally bemused by the nonsense that he sees in this country, because Scottish football is a soap opera. It really is a soap opera, and Tony will know that better than most, being involved in the media and the words that the media use to wind people up all the time. And I don't know if we're going to go and talk about the Glasgow Derby coming up, but I think last week in the paper, it was the Herald talked about Celtic trying to exploit a loophole to try and cancel the game. And you think, it's not a loophole, it's the rules. Those are the rules. Stop saying that. And then in the actual WhatsApp group, I just saw something there about the headline was Rangers had discussions with the SFA about the referee's performance the other night. And you're thinking, here we go again, another soap opera. Anyway, I'm off that tangent. Ange is the man. I think unbelievable what he's done on his own. Don Mackay comes in, Don Mackay goes. Ange is still there. He's having to deal with a new chief executive. We're spending money, which is great. That's obviously, and we're doing things really quickly. That's the other good thing about it. We're not messing about. And he did make the point after the first transfer window that maybe he wasn't forceful enough. I think he was putting a marker down there to say that I'm not going to be that, less forceful again. I think the results on the pitch, we've won a cup and things are going well, but we've got 4 really tough league games coming up. I think is it Hearts away and United at home and Glasgow Derby and then Pittodrie. Let's see how people are talking after those 4 games. So at bits of the season, I think lots of people have been anti-Ange. Post the Tony Macaroni game, there was a lot of this guy's a dud. I think we have to keep kind of level-headed about where we are. But he's certainly been a phenomenal appointment. You mentioned Eddie Howe. He's not doing too good at Newcastle just now. Maybe he might come good. But certainly when you look at the alternatives that we could have got, and we'd all have been happy with Benitez, Maresca or Marsh, and we got this unknown guy, and he's done a phenomenal job. But it's still mid-season, so let's see how things pan out.
See, I love the voice of reason, Tony, when we come to Jim, and he just tempers the enthusiasm. He brings everybody back down to earth. Actually, it wasn't that long.
Just button from. I kind of tend to be looked at as this old negative guy on a Friday that they just, this is negative. I think you just look for things that could be better. And in terms of Monday night's game, people were saying it was a fantastic performance. It was a good first half. We played, and it was a pretty dire second half. But we get the job done. We got the 3 points. That's the most important thing. Absolutely the most important thing. But there was things in the game you think that could be better. And I'm sure Alan's got the stats that says this could have been better and that could have been better. Because my big concern about this season, I think we can win this league. But I think we've got the players to win the league.
Mm-hmm.
I think there have been rivals are there to be taken. I think they're a good team. I don't think people say they're not very good. They are good. They didn't play particularly well the other night. But one of the things that this will come down to, I think, it'll be dead tight. We're not going to win this league by 9 or 10 points. If we win it, we're going to win it by a point or 2. And goal difference could play a major part. And Ange talked at the start of the season in that famous video about we don't stop to the end. I thought we stopped after about 60 minutes the other night. Hibs weren't interested. Hibs had, fell back in that second half. The game was there to be taken. The subs should have been on much, much quicker. We should have went for it to score a few more goals, because I think goal difference could be a big thing. So I think in every game you have to look for bits that you could do better, and that's not been negative. That's just saying that could have been better. And I think in Monday night, I was a bit surprised by the over-the-top reaction about this was the greatest game in the world. It wasn't as good as Easter Road first half. It wasn't as good as Canada's first half. And there was a lot, and actually Hibs had more of the ball, I think, overall. And I think they had a lot of the ball in the first half. So they played quite an expansive game, which we like. That means that we can then find some spaces. But I don't think I'm trying to temper the enthusiasm. I'm just saying I think there's things that let's not get too over the top just now. Long way to go. But if in 4 games time that if we manage to take at least a point in the Glasgow Derby and win another 3 games, then I might get excited.
The thing is, though, Jim, I don't think it's a bad thing, because as emotional football fans, we do tend to get a wee bit carried away from time to time. And I think a big part of Monday was the fact that we were back in the stadiums. There had been a break. People were raving, and we'll talk about the debut boy, Riho Hatate. People were raving about him, and JP yesterday said, you know what? He played well. But, he wasn't raving about him, and Declan disagreed. And that is the beauty of having a whole host of contributors on Acsom, is that, and by the way, you've not seen the WhatsApp group. We can disagree, we can agree, and we can meet in the middle and all that kind of stuff. But Alan said something earlier on, and I thought it might resonate with you, Tony. He was talking about the culture and the different cultures within it. And I thought back to the 1988 FA Cup final when the Crazy Gang beat the Culture Club. Celtic have become something of a culture club, haven't they?
Well, I think if Celtic manage to beat Rangers this season, you'll be flipping that on its head and saying the Culture Club will beat the Crazy Gang, because it's Ange that's the one positive thing that you see from Ange. He's still in a club culture there. There's a style, there's a philosophy, and I think the Celtic fans now see the direction that the club is heading in, and they're liking what they see. That was a word I used this morning to private message to a guy, and I used that phrase, the Culture Club will beat the Crazy Gang if Celtic beat Rangers this season at some point. And I also wrote on the Celtic Way the other day that he's not even started. As Alan said, I wrote a piece saying this is the foundations of the beautiful house, and he's going to build 2 things. He's going to build an immovable object and an irresistible force. That's the line I ended it on. That's his plan. And he's bringing in players, one, because they're good, but two, they're fitting seamlessly into a system because he knows them, he has knowledge of them. Those guys hit the ground running the other night. Yeah, you don't want to be all hyperbolic about it. They played well. They were good. I just want to know if Jim is happy in the haze of a drunken hour. You know what I mean?
Heaven knows. I was thinking more of the dogs barking and caravans and all that in the background there, Tony.
Yeah, but you do have to temper it with realism. It's one game. They played well. Might well come down to goal difference. Celtic are still missing chances. That's one thing that they could do better. Absolutely. And I've been banging on about that since day one when Kyogo came, when he got a hat-trick and he could have had a double hat-trick, and people were saying, oh, you're out of order. Well, no out of order. Fine margins. Get the very man there in the bottom of the screen who'll tell you about fine margins, chances, XG and all that, who understands it more. I'm more of an Excel man like Ange, but I'm picking up more of it when I speak to Alan. And it will come down to that. This league's going to the wire. It's going to be a fine margin that wins the title. So, as Jim said there, how's were there for the taking for a 4 or a 5? Should have put the foot on the metal, or the pedal to the metal, and we won. We won well. Guys played well. Let's keep it up. But that intensity, we want to keep that going. As Ange said himself, we don't stop. These are the things the manager's picking up on. Supporters are now picking up on it as well and saying, yep, we can do things better. We can convert the chances on a higher percentage of the chances we create. And again, I'll leave Alan to give you the science on that, but it'll be startling, I would have thought.
Well, you mentioned a thing there about the fact that we could and should have putting Hibs to the sword. If you go to the halftime bulletin with myself and Laura, who is off today but will be back next week, I was talking like that, Tony, and I guess that's what I'm saying to Jim. Sometimes I need to keep my emotions in check because I was saying, we could win by 4 or 5 here. That was the kind of performance we were turning in, and it did taper off a wee bit. But talking about the stats and the figures, I would like to come to you, Alan, just to talk about the debut of Hatate, because from my observational view, just sitting there as a fan watching that game the other night, I thought he was particularly good. I think his range of passing was tremendous. And this is just me observing it as a fan, Alan. But yesterday it was interesting to hear how Declan agreed with me, but JP was like, he played well. He played well, but, it wasn't off the scale good. How did you look at his performance, his first performance in the hoops?
Yep. So, it sounds like the majority of fans watching the game in real time, I was just super excited about seeing him. He really caught the imagination. I think it was because of the variety of his play, the movement, the ability to find space, and also his ambition in terms of what he was trying to do with the ball. Now a lot of these things didn't come off, and actually, as I went back and captured the data for the game, he actually gave the ball away 6 out of his first 11 passes, which is not great. But he was usually trying to do something very progressive about it. And actually, if you look at his data from that game, he apart from chances created, he set up 3 chances, but they were all quite low quality chances. He didn't rank first on any of the metrics across the board. However, let me qualify that a little bit. So I capture, I'm not going to go into the detail particularly, but just you can imagine, I've got a lot of data around, let's call it defensive data, creative data, goal threat, right? Just very simple. Three categories you might expect. If you look at Hatate's output, he was 3rd or 4th or 5th on defensive stats. He was 3rd or 4th or 5th on creativity stats. He was 3rd or 4th or 5th on goal threat stats, right? And if you look at that profile, right, what that says to me, if I go back a few months, is Ryan Christie, because that's exactly what Ryan Christie used to do. That was his profile. He was kind of master of none of the skills, but he was the only. If you think about a spreadsheet and all the boxes, there was a number in just about all of them with Ryan Christie. Right, he did everything. He could do everything, and he contributed across the whole range of capabilities on the park that you want. And what I'm saying is, in a very roundabout kind of way, is that he was a real all-round midfield performance. So although he was not outstanding, and he definitely tired and tailed off from about 60 minutes, and I completely agree with Jim, I was actually angry about the lack of substitutions or the late lateness of substitution. The fact we didn't use all 5 was ridiculous to me. But anyway, that's another topic. Hatate, that was hugely encouraging. For the reason that I said, he looks like a genuine all-rounder. His defensive performance actually was the one that did stand out. But what the overarching feeling that I took away from his performance was just the ambition that he played with. That he played with hope. He played with ambition. He wanted to make positive things happen. And I love that in a player. He was optimistic. He could see through balls, and he did everything quickly. And I think that aspect of his play is what really led to the excitement, even if the numbers were a little bit average. But actually, if you look, you've got to look at the numbers in the whole, in the round. And I think it was hugely encouraging.
Well, that for me was quite surprising initially there, Alan, when you're talking about the amount of passes that he was that were going astray. But in terms of the Christie comment, I think I've said a few times, and again, from an observational perspective, that I thought Christie would have been pretty well suited to Ange Postecoglou's team. And it's a shame that it had gone too far down the line for that to be pulled back, because I think he would have excelled under Ange. I'm going to bring in as many comments as I possibly can from the viewers. So thanks everybody for getting involved. This is an interesting one, David. It was a masterstroke not getting how. What I would say is, we go back to the podcast at the beginning of the season, and you're reacting as news happens. So it was pretty clear at that time Celtic had gone quite far down the line with a specific manager, and it all fell in at the last minute. So what you're getting is you're getting the reaction to that. And then 6, 7, 8 months down the line, you're then looking at the performance of the manager who took the job. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to change your mind based on facts, based on what you've seen, rather than what was actually happening at the ground at that time. And the ineptitude of a boardroom to actually get a deal over the line. Yeah, absolutely delighted they didn't get the deal over the line and that we did get Ange Postecoglou. But I think what then happens is there's a wee bit of revisionism. So there's been 3 CEOs in the mix here. You've got Michael Nicholson at the moment, who's obviously working, or seems to be working well with Ange, getting deals over the line. You've got Don Mackay on his introductory interview claimed to have been right in the mix when it came to bringing in Ange. Ange was a man he wanted to be a part of bringing to the club. And then you've got this legacy issue of, well, actually, it was Peter Lawwell who brought it in. I guess this always happens, Jim, when something works out well, everybody wants a wee bit of the credit. Who do you think gets the credit for bringing Ange Postecoglou to Celtic?
Ange Postecoglou. Yeah, himself. I think, who knows what happens behind the scenes? I mean, we sit here and comment, and we've got no idea what we're talking about, to be perfectly honest, because we don't know what goes on behind the scenes. Alan deals in evidence-based stuff. You're going for a manager, you're saying, well, what's the evidence to get this guy? And guys like Benitez and Howe and Maresca and Mark, they'll tick lots of boxes. And so did Postecoglou, I suppose, ticked a lot of boxes. And I've got no idea what goes on behind the scenes and how. I mean, any transfer of a player is incredibly complex. So getting a manager, you can maybe multiply that by a bigger number the next year, a bigger number to come up with how complex that might be. Who gets the credit? Who knows? Who knows what Don Mackay did in these 72 days that he was there? Did he make any changes that are there? Did he change some of the mindset of the board? Who knows what goes on behind the scenes? That if we won the league at the end of the season, then Ange Postecoglou was the right guy to hire. If we end up losing the league by loads of points, people will maybe ask some questions. It's always a risk bringing in somebody. I mean, I think we brought in something like 20 players, something like that, in the last few months or so. And it's an astonishing number of players to bring in. Everyone's a risk. Mm-hmm. So a manager is the biggest risk of all. Who gets the credit, Paul? No idea, because we don't know enough about it. And then if something goes well, people will put their hands up and say, aye, that was me, I did that. And if it all went pear-shaped, I don't think Peter Law would be saying that Big Ange was one of my ideas. Like he'd be distancing himself from that. But the big man's done remarkably well, so people are going to try and ride on the Ange train. That was me that did that, and it was me that advised him to come. And you'll see articles in newspapers with people saying, I always knew it'd be good. Did you?
Exactly.
So did you after Livingston? Did you? It's only one way of playing, etc. So that's why I think, let's get to the end of the season, and then we'll look back and we'll say, well, that was either pretty good or pretty average. Who get the credit? Who knows, Paul?
The big thing is, again, Tony, I'll come to yourself on this one. We are commenting as you see it at the time. I mean, we didn't have a Celtic State of Mind when Mo Bangura signed, but I just imagine what the broadcast would have been the following day after we'd seen the show reels on YouTube. Oh, what a signing we've got. Henrik Larsson thinks he's a great player. He's going to be a legend. You know, you get it wrong from time to time. And I'll tell you what, if I was disappointed around about the time that Ange got the job, I'm not now.
I think we were disappointed in the process. We weren't disappointed with Ange. As Jim said, all these big names were linked with it, and you get swept up in that vortex and carried away with it all. And then I remember making the comment at the time, they wanted an appointment, they got a disappointment. People have, and certain Celtic supporters were disappointed when Ange came in. You can't hide that. Nobody can say for a fact that even if they were on the Ange train, that they knew he was going to be successful, knew he was going to be good. You can't say that. But myself and Jim, and I remember having a podcast on a Friday, and we said we would form a better judgment in 6 months. We said that. So now we're forming a better informed judgment based on what Jim always called game-based evidence. So you're watching him perform, you're watching his team perform and players. So we said that, and we were, we won't say disappointed. We were disappointed in the process and the people that had brought him in so swiftly after seeing a supposed manager and backroom set up like Eddie Howe collapse at the last minute. It was typical Celtic the way they did business. And as you say, 6 months, 7 months, whatever it is down the line, we're all delighted that Ange is here. So can't sit and tell me that the minute Ange walked in the door, Celtic supporters were like, this guy's going to be a success. No, everybody was scrambling for to get information about him, reading his book and to see how successful he'd been in Australia and Japan, because they didn't know too much about him. And if people were saying from day one they knew he was going to be successful, that was just blind faith and blind optimism in the fact that he was appointed the new Celtic manager.
I think the people on this podcast who probably were of that view, Tony, would have probably been Jared from Celts Down Under and Dan from the Japan Times, and we got them on the show, and that was their view
because they had knowledge, of him. The same way Ange had knowledge of the J League and has brought in players that will improve the club because he knows they can fit into a system. Once you have knowledge, then you can form opinions based on that. A lot of Celtic supporters had no knowledge of Ange, and it was a disappointing circumstance in which he was kind of brought in the door after the collapse of something that a lot of people had bought into at that time, i.e. Eddie Howe. Are we happy Eddie Howe's not here? Well, Jim's saying it there. Time will tell. Let's get to the end of the season and see where we are. See if we're £40 million richer straight into the Champions League group stages or have to negotiate the qualifiers again. But that doesn't make him a good or a bad manager. So,
I think one of the most sorry, Tony. I think one of the most bizarre comments that was made at that time, I think it was Dan. He says something like, "Have you heard of Bob the Builder?" And you're thinking, "Where's he going with this?" He said, "Ange is the rebuilder," and you're thinking, "All right, fine, okay." And he's been right.
Yeah,
he's the rebuilder.
And that's we're talking about he's talking about the. I mean, he alludes to it himself, doesn't he? With the building of the beautiful house and you don't look over in the neighbour's garden. So he's been spelling it out. So you're reacting, as you say, Paul, to things that have been happening as they've been going along. You're a football supporter. You care about the club, so you care about things that happen. So, and you come on a podcast and you speak your mind and you speak your opinion. We've never ever said this is right, this is wrong. We just give an opinion. And be, for better, for worse. And lots of people share it. So lots of people like it. Some people don't like it. It's not the end of the world. We are still evolving under Ange. But 6 months into, 7, 8 months into his tenure, we are liking what we're seeing. But we're tempering it with realism as well. We'll see where we are come May. We've won a trophy. Great. And we are within striking distance of Rangers at the top. Could we have asked for anything more at this stage of the rebuild? I don't think so. And as Alan says, and I agree with as well, I think the rebuild's just starting now.
Yeah. We asked the question, and I always remember Kevin Graham saying at the beginning of the season, if we're in touching distance when we come back from the winter break, and we certainly are within touching distance. On the point of Hatate then, Alan, I think the biggest thing that I took from his performance is the difference that you see when a manager brings a player in specifically to fit a system. It's not as though you've got all these players and you're trying to work them into a system. And I think that's where he was when he took over, simply because the personnel wasn't there. But it does lead me to wonder where that leaves James McCarthy. Now, I have been a champion of James McCarthy, and I haven't seen enough yet. As I was saying yesterday, he's only played 390 minutes for Celtic, but I haven't seen enough yet that he does fit the system. I've been impressed with some of his performances, but he didn't slot in like Hatate did the other night.
No, I think what's continuing to evolve, and this is an evolution, and just for the record, even if we don't win the league this year, I think we're on the right road, and I'm firmly in that camp, and I will be at the end of the season. I'm happy to be there. What you saw at the beginning of the season was definitely some recruitment choices that were little bit head scratching as far as the fit with the style of play that we were clearly trying to implement. And James McCarthy probably being the most obvious example of that. Here was a player in his 30s that seemed to be physically on the decline. And we've been through this with Scott Brown over the last few years. I don't want to dig that up again. Who's probably going to be on a pretty big wage. And it just was a really head-scratching signing. Whereas Hatate is the epitome of the direction I think we need to go, which is somebody who's been sourced from an undervalued league, who's of a good age, who's already shown he's an international quality. And we've paid like $1.5 million for him. It's just that is a brilliant signing. And then this week we've got another in a similar mode, Matt O'Reilly, who again is somebody who's anyone who's followed the game in England. He's a name that's been on people's radar for a long time. A very talented young man, who again we've picked up for next to nothing. But who's most importantly, whose style of play is exactly what Celtic need. Mm-hmm. So when I wrote at the end of the last transfer window, I highlighted central midfield as a big red flag for me. It was the area of most risk because we didn't have enough players in there who could actually play the system that we wanted. We had two number 10s trying to be box-to-box 8s, and our best number 8 was also our best number 6. And then we had a bunch of number 6s that didn't seem to play, didn't seem to fit into the system at all, McCarthy being the most obvious of that. I think he's decided Sorrow's not good enough, so he's not going to feature. And Bitton has actually, bless him, made a hell of a stab at trying to adapt and fit into the system, and credit to him for that. But McCarthy, for me, still stands out. He's played very few minutes, and I keep saying I try and let a player have 900 minutes, because I tend to find after 900 minutes you've got sufficient evidence that, and you've generally got the sense of a player after that, and he's got nowhere near that. But I did do a piece on him, having said all that, which really showed that he's got a very, very specific skill set, and that skill set is, I would call him a mopper-upper, right? He's a bit of an old school number 6 that can. He's very good positionally. He knows, he can see where danger is going to be. He's strong in the challenge. He picks up the ball. He picks up the bits and pieces, and then he generally, he's better when he gives it simple because his long passing isn't very good. He can give the ball away a lot when he tries to overstretch in that regard. But that's a very specific skill set when you consider what I just said about Hatate. So Hatate's there. He's being creative. He's setting up chances. Hatate's winning challenges in midfield. Hatate's going to be threatening the goal, the same as Christie did, the same as O'Reilly will do, and the same as Rogic and Turnbull are striving to adapt their game to do as well. So McCarthy, for me, just doesn't fit in any shape or form, other than almost as a special teams player that you bring on with 50 minutes to go to close a game out, maybe, or a tough European game. You might come on if you're one up with 30 minutes to go or something like that. But that, to me, that's not what you want to pay a 30-year-old a lot of money to do, frankly.
It seems a bit of a luxury, Alan. I totally get that, and I think we've seen it a couple of times, particularly in Europe, where he's been brought on for that purpose. A wee bit like Ange, if that is his thinking. I think Sorrow, it's just not going to work for him in this particular team. And I have been impressed with Bitton. Is Bitton a player that you would retain, a player that you would keep around Celtic? Because I think he was one, and we've said this time and time again, that there's been many occasions where had he left Celtic, there wouldn't have been a great fanfare. But I think in terms of a squad player, and the way that he has adapted and the experience that he has, I think he can be quite important in the wider squad sense.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you said it. You've got a sweet spot here between the player himself and the club, where Beaton seems happy to be a club like Celtic. He's never going to play for a bigger club than Celtic. He's never going to have the profile that he does now. And Celtic are happy to have a player who can do, it looks like 2 or 3 different jobs, and therefore, is really useful to have around. Is an experienced individual, got a lot of international caps. So I think it works. That it's a marriage of convenience on that basis. I wouldn't be relying on him to be starting, every other game, that sort of thing.
Certainly not at centre half, Alan. Now, I'm going to bring this one over. I'm going to bring this one over to yourself, Jim. It's Urban Coolshay. That question will be answered on February the 2nd. And the question is, of course, how far has Celtic come under Ange Postecoglou? How big a concern is it, not just under Ange, that Celtic have not been able to get that monkey off their back for a while when it comes to getting that win against Rangers, Jim?
I don't think the answer will be in the 2nd of February. There's too much football to be played. Without being the negative old guy again, there's concerns I still have about. I mean, Alan will know this better than me. That set pieces are going to be key in that game, and we don't have that dominant centre half to either defend set pieces or attack set pieces up the other end, and that could be a key thing in that game. I mean, saw them the other night. They didn't play particularly well. Maybe that was a one-off. Who knows? We need a wee bit of luck in the game as well. That's always a big thing. You mentioned Beaton there, Paul, and you used the word experienced. We're bringing in all these new players who are not that experienced. No, so if we lose Rogic, which we think we're going to lose, and we bring in the new guy O'Reilly and think, okay, he can do a job, but you then think, hold on. I saw his interview last night, and he was saying, 60,000, amazing. It'd be amazing with 40,000. I mean, if he's pitched in there in front of 60,000 fans, millions on TV, that's a big ask. Do you think that was quite bizarre about Monday night there? Was for anyone who's never been to Celtic Park at night time these days, they switch all the lights off just before the game. I'm thinking, if I'm Hattati, I'm thinking, what's happening here? All the lights go off, and then there's a beam on the huddle, and he must be thinking, 60,000 fans going bonkers all the time. So I think that's kind of hard to get your head around. I think we've certainly got the team to win this game on the 2nd of January. And if we play to our capabilities and we get the rub of the green and we defend set pieces well, then there's no reason why we can't win that particular game. And but yeah, there's a lot riding on. And then again, who we're going to be missing. And I'm not sure about this rule about getting the game postponed. Is it 5 players have to be missing or
4?
Whatever? 4 is it?
Is that loophole, Jim?
It's not a loophole.
It's not a rule, it's a loophole.
Is it so it's a loophole rule that we've got now. That if it's 4, so why wouldn't you cancel the game against Hearts then? Why wouldn't you cancel the game against Dundee United? I know that then becomes a massive fixture pilot, but as I'd always say, just abide by the rules. Not looking for favours, not looking for loopholes. Just if that's the rules, that's the rules. Because if the other team would do it as well. So can you cancel 1 game instead of 3 games? Can you pick the game you cancel? I don't know. Rodic's a big miss because I mean, you can look through the team list here and you can say Hearts made such a difference. Carter Vickers, Jota, Kyogo. But Rodic's been the spark for me for a lot of what's happened this season. He's been the guy that sparked things. So Kyogo might be scoring the goals. A lot of that came from, good play by Rogic. The cup final winner. Rodic's, quick thinking, great pass, bang, goal. So we're all looking forward to the 2nd of February, but can't get too far ahead of ourselves. Hearts and United first, so we want to make sure we get into that game no more than 4 points behind. And if we could win that game, get down to a point. I think if we win that game and get down to a point, we'll win the league. So yeah, big game, but I don't think things will be decided there. As long as we don't lose the game, that's the main thing.
Absolutely. I mean, we know the experience you've got, Tony, speaking to a lot of people in football. And football's a tremendous place for the cliche, and you hear it constantly. They'll give you an answer just because it sounds like a stock answer, and people go on about form goes out the window in a game like this, right? I look at that situation, and although a lot of these things are cliches, one thing I do think is an issue is that mental barrier of having a team that you've not beaten in a long, long time, and that becomes an issue. What's your feeling on that, Tony? And is that something that, in the first game, there was a hell of a lot of frustration on my part from the selection of the team right through to various things that happened in the game. And I think that was an opportunity for us and an opportunity lost. But they do have an upper hand in terms of that mentality. And do you think we've got it in us to swing that mentality our way?
I think they have now. I think the manager would admit that he didn't have his personnel for Ibrox. You know, he played Kyogo out of position. He admitted that himself, that he maybe called that one wrong. You know, French area missed an absolute sitter. You know, ifs, buts and maybes. But as Jim said there, you need these things to go for you. You know, you have to defend set pieces, concede a goal to set piece, you know. And I go back to Jim, surely if Celtic are going to exploit the rules, that's a hoop hole, not a loophole. See what I did there? Trying, Jim, trying. Failing. Yeah. Something like that. You know, but I think Celtic now have the mentality. They've got Rangers on their sides, but they can't focus their energies on Rangers. Let's focus of energies Alloa on Saturday. You know, you give them the respect, and you get respect to every opposition. He might rest some players with an eye on Hearts in midweek. But Celtic have got a game tomorrow. You want to just carry that momentum right through, if you can. But we have got two massive games before we play Rangers in the league. But I think the Celtic have got the kind of bit between the teeth a wee bit now, and they didn't kick a ball on Tuesday night, and Rangers dropped 2 points. That gives you confidence and another boost. You did your part by beating Hibs. So, you know, I think Celtic will feel more equipped to cope with Rangers. But as Jim alluded to earlier, still a good team, Rangers. You know, and they still have that mentality that the Celtic haven't beat them in the league. And coming up, well, it's 2.5 years. You know, so it's you know, talk about pressure. Pressure's on Celtic to go and do something about that. They'll have the advantage of the full crowd at home, if that, you know. So, you know, you're in front of your home fans. It's up to you to put on a performance, and it's up to Ange to pick a team capable of winning. And I think Jim's right. If all in a level playing field, if Celtic can play the team that they want, minus Rogic, obviously because he's away on international duty, then I think Celtic can. They're certainly capable of beating Rangers. I think Rangers at this moment could be there for the taking. But it's no saying it, it's doing it. That old Glasgow phrase, isn't it? You know, talk the talk all you want, go and walk the walk. And I think Ange will be drumming that into his players. You know, it's all right saying you're ready for this, you can handle it. Go and prove it. You know, and I think a lot of Celtic supporters want to see that change in mindset, that they can go and beat Rangers, but don't underestimate the size of the task, because Rangers are still. The other night they had a bad day at the office. You know, it happens, and it's going to happen to both sides before the end of the season. You know, twists and turns and points dropped. So, you know, Celtic had it against St Mirren, they've had it against Livingston. This is going to happen, and it will go to the wire. And February 2nd, yeah, it's going to be crucial, but you've got two arguably bigger matches to contend with before that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
League-wise, certainly.
No, you're right. And again, that game against Alloa is something we need to talk about. There's no disrespect to Alloa. And I think when we go into it, Tony, we've all seen games where we've gone in against lower league opposition and they've actually done us over. And it's the worst thing ever as a Celtic fan. I'm looking at this game at the weekend and I'm wondering, you know, looking at that squad, who do we rest? And I'm saying rest because I think there's a few positions in there where it may not be about resting, it's just rotational. I do think that, you know, when it comes to the wingers, and we'll talk about them at some point in the show, there may be more of a rotation than just saying, well, it's time to rest Cameron Carter-Vickers, for example. And Celtic Follower comes in with some suggestions. Do you see, Alan, some of these names who I reckon might be classed as fringe players getting a game? Giakoumakis, for example, he's not had much game time. It could benefit him to get the minutes in the legs. But again, I don't like tinkering too much with a winning team.
No, I think you do have to rotate. I mean, the second biggest risk that we've had throughout the season has been just the style of adapting to the style of play. I'm guessing adapting to the training, which by all accounts is pretty intense.
Mm-hmm.
That the injuries have been, in some respects, self-inflicted because of that, and we've had to make an awful lot of changes, especially through December, on unforced, forced changes essentially. So I think we've got to be careful. I think we're also in a position where some players need minutes and some players probably could do with the rest. I mean, do you really need to let Callum McGregor run around for another 90 minutes on plastic? Is that really going to make the difference in the game? I would suggest not. But then there's players like you say that like Giakoumakis who probably would benefit. Forrest is just back from injury. He actually looked pretty good, I thought, against Hibs. His direct running, I think, really helped Celtic get up the park. He could probably do with minutes. I think the two lads, Hatate and Maeda, could do with minutes because they haven't played a league game since the 4th of December. So there's some players that need minutes. But then I think we've also got to look at the circumstances. So would you really pitch Chris Jullien onto a plastic pitch, for his first game back after a serious knee injury? I think that would probably be a risk too much. So I'd probably be looking to keep the centre-back pairing together, really not make any changes there at all, because building that relationship back up again. Starfelt had a horrendous run of games against Ross County. The cup final was just awful, but then the last 2 games he's been excellent, Starfelt, and Carter Vickers also as a pair. So I'd be tempted to keep that together. Probably I would be happy to swap Bain in for Hart. You'd probably reward Rolson with a 90 minutes at right back. You'd probably keep Taylor in because he needs minutes. You'd definitely give Cal the day off. Absolutely no doubt about that. And you might give Rogic the day off. But other than that, I think the other players that I've mentioned probably need minutes. So, you want to get them on the park.
Mm-hmm. But we've been talking a wee bit about some of the centre-half options that we now have now that Jullien's come in. Jim, and I'm going to ask you this question because we have brought in a lot of loan players over the last decade or so, and some have stuck, some have become permanent. Most of them have gone on to pastures new, and some of them have become nomadic figures. I mean, we're talking about Paddy Roberts, yet another deal with another team in another country again. Paddy Roberts, who was a favourite at Celtic. But we've got a player in Cameron Carter-Vickers who's come into Celtic and he seems to fit. I'd like to know at some point Alan's views on him, figures-wise and stats-wise. He seems to really fit the Celtic side. I mean, he plays with a coolness and a calmness. He's had a few partners in at the centre-half position there. But, I mean, we are, I think, the 7th club that he's been on loan to. Yet a lot of the focus is on, get Jota in on a permanent deal. How important do you think it is that we focus a wee bit more on Carter-Vickers and getting him in a permanent deal, Jim?
With the chat that last time I was on in terms of Carter-Vickers, I think he's been great. He's been dead solid. I think he's a wee bit short for me again about the set pieces thing. I think the up against teams who have got bigger players, then he might struggle a wee bit. And what I said last time was that both him and Starfelt haven't scored a goal from a header, which I don't know what the stats on that are, Alan, in terms of what you'd expected centre-back pairing goals they should be scoring in a season by this point in time, but none sounds like not very good. But he's been dead solid, hasn't put a foot wrong, he's been exceptional, and long may that continue. Yes, I would sign him, and last time I was on I was just saying, how much do you sign him for? What sounds like good value? Because people band about good value for money, and you think, well, based on what? What's that based on? So you can say that $6 million for Carter-Vickers is good value compared to 80 million for Harry Maguire. Yeah, it's good value, but maybe compared to someone else, is it good value? And that's the only point I was making last time, that how much do you pay for somebody? Yeah, get the guy in because he's really, really good, but how much do you pay for him? And if you spend that money on him, do you not have the money for this big commanding centre-half, which I think we need? Now, if Jullien comes back and he solves that problem, then we don't need the big commanding centre-half because he's in the building. But if he doesn't come back, and I've got kind of concerns that with the injury that he got, the length of time he was out, it's going to take him a while to get back to those kind of levels, if indeed he does. So again, you have to kind of balance the books a wee bit. I was thinking the other day that Tony's always mentioned about the old Shoot magazine, You Are the Ref, where for people who didn't get Shoot at the time, there was like they were showing various options, and You Are the Ref, and is the answer A, B, or C, and not the view had option D, book Paul Elliott. But at times I think you have to be, you are the accountant. You are the accountant. If you've only got so much money to spend, then you can't just say, aye, he's good value at $6 million. Based on what? What is it based on? It's a throwaway line. people make, you know. But in terms of answering the question, I think Carter Vickers has been very, very good. Him and Joe Hart have made such a huge difference to that defence. But in saying that, when we come up against real good quality opposition, they've been turned over. You know, your Leverkusens and your Betis, and we've lost lots of goals. You know, so I think you have to temper that by, again, I'm going to sound dead negative, that the standard of football in this league isn't great. I mean, Hibs the other night, I thought Hibs the other night in the first half, back to middle, were really, really good, but they'd nothing up front. And most teams, I think, in the SPFL have nothing up front. And that's why they don't win as many games. And watching the game at Pittodrie the other night, Aberdeen played really well, but they'd nothing up front. I couldn't see them scoring. They ended up penalty kick. I think that's the only way they're going to score, as a set piece. So you have to maybe consider the opposition that Cameron Carter Vickers is up against week in and week out. But against that opposition, he's been absolutely great. He's been fine. And long may that continue. In terms of tomorrow, I'd agree with Alan. Again, some people need minutes, some people don't need minutes. The one thing I would caution is the fact that when we left Carl McGregor out at the Ross County game, was that League Cup last season? It was,
yeah.
We lost. We missed his kind of inspirational play at the time. I don't think we lose to Alloa.
We had so many other problems. That was the least of the problems that we had.
But I think there's certain players that, I wouldn't play him tomorrow, but to have him on the bench. And I think you've also got to consider this is like for a lot of the Alloa players. This will be the biggest game in their life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so they'll be getting stuck in a bit of a battle tomorrow. So we need a bit of physicality in there. Ralston, Yakimakis, Scales, guys like that. But also, it's on plastic, so you don't want to run the risk of your key men getting injured. But to answer the question, yeah, he's been a really good loan deal. We should certainly try and get him. It's just the amount of money we should pay for him.
Well, it's a good point, Jim, because I think you look at the record that we've got in the transfer market, and we've signed so many, not only centre forwards but centre halves, and it's not worked out, Tony, and it's a couple of £1 million here and there. What we've got at the moment is we've got Starfelt, £4.5 million, so there's a marker. We've got Julien, the most expensive defender we've ever bought, I think, £7 million. So whereabout is he in that, that equation? So the £6 million figure seems high. Of course it does, especially when you're bringing in players from the J League, but it's the circumstances. We're buying them from Spurs. They're going to want some kind of fee, a decent fee. £6 million for me at his age, I think would be a fair enough fee, personally. But on another point that Jim says about Julien, about this, we need this big imposing defender. Yeah, I tend to agree with that. And I'm looking at the Julien stats. One of the biggest frustrations for me at the moment, not only imposing in our own box, but imposing in the opposition's box, because the amount of crosses we put in any given game, the amount of corners we win, and sometimes you don't even think that it's going to put the opposition in any kind of danger, Tony, and that shouldn't be the case. You think about some of the central defensive partnerships we've had who were at corners very dangerous, Denier and Van Dijk, and I know that they were maybe an anomaly because they were a very good partnership, but they would have put the opposition under severe pressure. McManus and Caldwell, even. And I don't think we've got that from our defenders at the moment. Does Julien fix that problem for us?
Well, first and foremost, I agree with Jim. I'd be very wary with Julien and taking, daft risks with him. Mm-hmm. This guy needs, watched closely and monitored, and his rehabilitation, he's back into it gently and play bit parts here and there. We all want him to be this defensive colossus. Will he be? Not too sure. Can he recapture the levels that he had? But I think a lot of people still had reservations about Julien before he got injured, and all of a sudden he's morphed into Koeman, hasn't he? Mm-hmm. He's got an eye for a long pass. He can hit free kicks. He's a scorer and all that. And he did do some of those things, but he's no Beckenbauer, is he? And I think people's judgment over time gets a bit, you get kind of sepia-tinted glasses about players. He was an accomplished defender before he got injured, I would say. But if you're going to sign, what Jim was saying, a dominant defender who's a threat in both boxes, these guys cost money too. Mm. And I think you'd be lucky to get someone like that who can contribute goals as well for £6 million. Carter Vickers, against the opposition that's in front of him, hasn't really put a foot wrong. He's playing in the stingiest defence in Scottish football at the minute. Granted, it's ratcheted up a level when they go into Europe, but it's always been the case for Celtic. It's ratcheted up a level. You're up against better quality players, but that's something that you can contend with as you move along. Celtic need a period of kind of continuity, and to bring in somebody new, then you're going to have to. They're going to have to adapt to Ange's system. It costs a lot of money, possibly more than the money that's been quoted for Cameron Carter Vickers. And I just think if Carter Vickers fancies it and wants to be part of this revolution that Ange's bringing in, then yeah, we should sign him. And I think $6 million is a fair enough price. Personally, and I think Ange can work on, because Ange has said himself, he's not just here to win the League Cup and the league. He wants to have a tilt at Europe. And I think he won't say it outwardly, but inwardly, I think he'll be having his eyes on the Conference League. He will want to win that.
Is it on the 25th of May this year, is it, the final?
It is indeed.
Wow. What a stroke of genius that is, eh?
Well, there you go. He could write himself into it. But he is planning on Celtic being a force and a noise in Europe again. And he's getting his building blocks in place. As Jim alluded to earlier, Bob the Builder, he went to number one. Bob the Builder, didn't he, I believe? So I'm sure that song went to number one to bring music into it again. It was garbage, but it still went to number one.
Stunned silence.
Yeah. You know the words, Jim. Don't kid on you don't know the words.
Yes, you can.
Yes, you can, exactly. And that's what we're asking. Can Ange fix it? Can he fix the defence? Can he fix Celtic's problems? He's doing it right now, and I think he probably sees Carter Vickers as, a vital brick in that rebuilding process. So I wouldn't balk at spending $6 million on Carter Vickers, because I think he can be improved as a defender. And I agree with what Alan said there. Last 2 games, Starfelt's been pretty sound. I think he came back the other night he looked like a revitalised and re-energised player, Starfelt, and so that all got well for me. But we just need to caulk Annie with Julian, because it's a serious injury that he's had, and I wouldn't risk him at all on the Indodrill surface at all.
No, I'd be shocked. I'd be shocked if he made an appearance.
Right, the temptation is there to do it, but just no, not on that kind of surface.
No, I agree. I still call it the Rex Recreation Park there, Tony. Old school. Interesting point Jim raised, Al. I'm going to throw it to you. I know it's maybe not a specific answer you can give us, but looking at Julian, he scored 10 goals for Celtic in 61 appearances. I don't know how many starts that includes. For a team like Celtic, would you be expecting that? Is that a wee bit higher than you would expect for a centre-half?
Really, you got to think this guy was the most aerially dominant defender in League and at both ends of the pitch. Right, and Ligue 1's a really good league, right? One of the top 5 leagues in Europe. So he's an aerially dominant player. I do feel people are damning him with faint praise a little bit here. If I plot to take a step back. Evaluating defenders individually is a bit tricky because defending's a team game, right? Defending's about system and organisation and approach. And as we saw with Duffy last season, you can take what by any objective measure, Shane Duffy's a good defender. He's an experienced international. He's played in the EPL. But if you put the player in the wrong system and surround him with dysfunctionality, he can look awful, right? So defending can be is a complicated thing to assess in the round. But having said all that, I do track a lot of individual performance metrics for defenders, and for central defenders, I've got a methodology for doing that I think meets the eye test really well. So what with the way that the data, the narrative that you can pull from the data makes sense to me. And if you plot Julian in, then Julian is up there with the best central defenders we've had in all the time that I've been collecting data. And he is easily the most aerially dominant defender that we've had. So I'm hoping and praying that a fit Chris Julian comes back, because I think that would be a massive bonus for Celtic. But I completely agree with Tony. I'm just really nervous actually about how long it's going to take him to get back into the team. And in fact, I'd even make a prediction, which I don't tend to do, that I doubt we'll see the best of him this season at all. And if we get any games in before the end of the season, that would be a bonus.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's a big miss, and I think he's needed because of that aerial threat. Although I had a wee chuckle to myself. I think if you asked any football fans from any club in the world about what do you think your weaknesses are, they'll always say two things. We don't score enough goals from corners, and we're really bad at defending crosses into the box. Well, you know what? Only less than 2% of corners result in goals. And guess what? If you get the ball in the box, that's where most goals are scored from. So, yeah, that's kind of how you concede goals. So that's not a narrative I'd like to follow. I'd rather look at the individual performances, look at the way that we're playing and say, are we conceding more goals than we should? Are we scoring less than we should? And think of it in those terms. Carter Vickers isn't the tallest, but he's got incredibly strong upper body strength. So if in an aerial challenge situation, he can win the ball, not because he can out jump the opponent, but because he can physically position his body in a way that allows him to muscle the other guy out of his optimal position. So you don't have to be the tallest to be aerially competent. Carter Vickers, by the way, is right up there with Julian and with Van Dijk as the best centre backs, the data wise, that we've had. So I'd be absolutely finding ways to get this guy to sign. And you've got to think, again, context is important, right? So Carter Vickers is being asked to play in a new team, new teammates, new system. He's been asked to play a very high line, and he's been asked to play with a partner, Starfelt, who's been incredibly skittish and inconsistent and put in some really bad performances beside him. And yet individually, Carter Vickers' performances have stood up despite all of those things. I think he's an absolute must-buy.
Brilliant. I'll tell you what, Alan, I thought he was beforehand, and I think even more so after that. Alan, you can be found on Twitter at Celtic by Numbers, am I right?
That's right, yep.
Yeah, and on that Twitter page, there will be links to your blog, and you also go out live on various platforms on the Huddle Breakdown, which is definitely worth a watch if you've liked the stats and the figures and the data that Alan has provided today. I certainly do. I always have done, Alan. It's intriguing. And it's really, when I look at the Julien and Carter Vickers, it's getting me into a position where I can't wait to see the two of them at their optimum, if that day ever comes. And if that means we need to rest Julien a wee bit more than we would like at the moment, then let's do that. I'll tell you what, it's been a quick hour. We had 10 points. I think we got through 2 of them, guys. But that is an hour plus. We managed to get a wee bit of chat about the Who and Bob the Builder in there as well, Tony. But we look forward to tomorrow night's game. And after that, we will be back on Monday. We will be covering the game. Please join us. If you're watching on YouTube, get subscribing on there. You'll notice that there has been loads of new content going on there of all different shapes, sizes and descriptions, and that will continue. So please subscribe to YouTube for daily content from A State of Mind. All that's left for me to say is thank you to Tony, Jim and to Alan for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Yes, Paul.